Well, hey everyone. Welcome to the Easter Pod. I'm your host, Corey Easterday, and on this episode, we are chatting with the one and only Dr. Keith Cradle. As we cover in our conversation, Keith is one of those highly active people who is hashtag never not working, as he likes to say, and he's someone who has multiple roles, titles, and projects going at any given time, but everything he does is rooted in his love for the city of Charlotte, community, and people. Keith shared a lot of great wisdom and insight and was incredibly gracious with his time, so I'm really excited for you to hear this one. Before we dive into the episode, I just wanted to say a very heartfelt thank you. Thank you for listening, supporting, sharing, and all the ways you've interacted and engaged with the show. The week I'm recording this intro, we hit as high as number 30 in the Indie Society and Culture category on the Good Pods charts, and number 54 in all of Society and Culture category for podcasts on Good Pods. And while numbers don't mean everything, Keith is a fellow podcaster, so we actually talk about that in our conversation. It's just always cool to be affirmed and encouraged and to see the ways that people are engaging as I work on the show and work to bring you more exciting episodes and guests. Speaking of exciting guests, be sure to check out our last episode with my wife and owner of Easterday Creative, Megan Easterday. I'm obviously biased, but I had a lot of fun chatting with Megan, and her wisdom and insight and just the overall conversation we had is well worth the listen. If you like the Easter Pod, you can follow the show on social media at the Easter Pod. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can help the show by spreading the word, subscribing, and leaving us a rating or review. As always, shout out to Speak Seldom for providing the music for this episode, and to Laird Creative Agency for helping to produce this episode. And last, but certainly not least, check out Keith Cradle and all his work on social media at Camping With Cradle, at Crafted With Cradle, and visit his website, keithcradle.com. There's a bunch of links in the show notes. Keith is involved in a lot of stuff as we talk about, so we put a bunch of links in the description for this episode, so check those out to learn more. Without further ado, my conversation with Dr. Keith Cradle. You got me. So I'm doing my research on today's guest, trying to formulate questions and make sure we hit every topic I want to hit and discuss everything he's involved in. But I got to be honest, when you start to dive into everything that Keith Cradle does in the Charlotte community, there's seemingly no end in sight. I mean, literally, I could spend hours on the internet reading all the press, all the stuff that he's done over time, the things he's been involved in. He's an author, podcast host, community engagement specialist, nonprofit entrepreneur, cultural arts advocate, and quite frankly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I am so thrilled and honored to have him on the show. Keith Cradle, welcome to the Easter Pod. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. And it's good to finally meet you too.
Yeah, before we dive in, I first truly have to offer you an apology because I know that on your podcast, Crafted With Cradle, you typically have, a great crafted beverage in hand, a cocktail with your guests, and I don't have that. I don't have anything for you today, unfortunately. I made you go back out to your car to get your own water, so the hospitality level is a little bit different. Yeah,
we're starting off on a bad note around here. We got to figure out, first talk to your producer. Is that you, though? Whoever we need to talk to, if that is you, then we need to have a strong conversation about how we need to get this thing, get this ship righted.
Well, we are building a team, okay. Let's say with the Easter Pod, even though my name's on it. I got some folks helping behind the scenes, but I do have to take full responsibility for the hospitality issues. And this is my solemn vow here forward that anytime I have a guest in person, because all my first episodes are recorded over Zoom. So anytime I have a guest in person, we're not only going to have a handcrafted cocktail, we're going to have beer options, tea, coffee,
there we go.
Full buffet menu.
So that means I'm coming back then. So whoever the next guest is, I'm going to be sitting in the two little chairs in the corner I can go ahead and get the beverage that was promised to me.
Yep, you can be the honorary hospitality person. I'm not going to make you do any work.
I'm in.
That's just, you're going to have the title, you're going to sit in the corner, enjoy the hospitality.
I'm in.
All right, because you're pointing out what we're lacking, so I appreciate it. We're going to get that fixed. So we connected, like many people over the last couple of years, we connected on social media. I believe it was toward the end of 2020. I attended the Charlotte Podcast Festival, and that's where I first heard about you, heard about Crafted with Cradle, and started following you on social media. I've been bragging to people that, hey, who you having on the podcast? You're running some more episodes. Like, I got Keith Cradle on. He's my next guest. And there are some people who didn't know who you are in Charlotte, which blew my mind because to me, you're like Mr. Charlotte. But, it reminded me the importance of doing the show, getting stories out there, whatever. So, you have so many cool things we're going to dive into, but let's start off simple. So, if you're just meeting someone for the first time, how do you describe Keith Cradle?
I think for me, that's tough. I just look at it from that this is the life that I've created and had, for all these years. I'm a college graduate, from John C. Smith University, UNCC. And I just love this community. I think that, that's the first thing I think people recognize about me, no matter what I do, is that I have a genuine affinity for Charlotte and this community and all that it can represent, all that it can be. And I lead with that. You know what I'm saying? I let the work speak for itself. You know what I'm saying? I don't never go into things thinking about how do I describe myself? Even when I look at my website or when people have you come out and do things and they read your bio and you're like it's sometimes kind of cringeworthy. You know what I'm saying? Like, is that me? But it is the things you've done, but to kind of hear them, summed up in a paragraph or two, sometimes it can sound like an obituary, and you're like, damn, if that was it for me, like, is that it? And so I think that's hard for me to process that there's a description that people will use for you when there's a constant evolution that's going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're always looking for, well, me anyway, you're always looking for what's next and what can I do to help, or, where does someone need me, or, where's the gap and what can I fix? So it just never, for me, feels like there's this story that, how do you describe it? I don't know. This thing is just constantly, writing itself, minute by minute, day to day, month to month, year to year. And I tell folk all the time, I'm just blessed to be able to have been the person that I get to be, all 47 of these years.
Yeah, and there's obviously no right answer to a question like that, but I think that's a really great answer in that, when I think of someone like yourself, that word, love and love for your community comes to mind just from what I've seen online and the little interactions we've had, back and forth on social media here and there. But I think you're right. It is an evolution. It's a constant growth process. Defining ourselves is a very weird exercise in general. So, it's a little bit like I asked that question, but then, how would I answer that if someone said, hey, define Corey Easterday, or how, if you're just meeting someone for the first time, how do you describe yourself? And to be honest, I've struggled. I'm 33 and I've struggled with that my whole life because you're right. It is a constant evolution, growth process, and inevitably, people that don't know you like myself are going to maybe see you one way, but you live with yourself every single day. So you see all the ups and downs, ins and outs, whatever. So it's hard to kind of balance that with something I've always worked on personally is wanting to balance how I want people to perceive me, or because we all have a certain way we want people to see us, or like how the world does perceive me versus kind of the internal stuff. And my goal has always been to make sure that those things are lined up as much as possible. So I'm not just some kind of outward facing whatever, and then behind the scenes I'm this. It's like you're trying to just be like the same person all the time. Yeah,
that's kind of how it should be. That, for many of us, if we have a great group of friends, a great circle, of community, of family, they help keep you grounded. And so, so my friends don't walk around calling me Dr. Cradle all day. You know what I'm saying? But that is what my students will call me. That's what someone's going to introduce you as. But your friends aren't like, oh, here comes Dr. Cradle. Hey, they know you for who you've been all those other years. Now, while they have celebrated and encouraged and pushed all those major accomplishments, it's not on them to continue to, lift you up and pump your head up, you know what I'm saying, because of those things. Their job and what we've all have grown to be a part of is that, we are in this together, and they are here to keep you rooted, keep you grounded, and recognizing that, right, you don't get too far ahead of any of those things, because at any given point, it could stop, it could get taken away. And so you've got to move in that humble space. And it's tough for some people to be humble about things that they're doing, which again, if you're doing it the right way, if people are asking you to talk about it, if people are wanting more information, if people want you to somewhat, i.e. brag about it, then that's your job to do that. You know what I'm saying? Because this is what you're trying to get across. But if it comes off as selfish, disingenuous, where it really is about clout chasing and just about me, then people recognize that too. And that's when folk kind of just feel like, well, like they're not really in it for anything more than themselves. And there is a fine line to balancing out, success, accolades, accomplishments, because there will come, the interviews and that's just a part of it. You have to, it's all in the game, as they say, on The Wire, man. The game is the game.
I'm so glad you referenced The Wire. Just have to get that in
man,
there.
Best show ever, man. But the game is the game. And so you have to understand that everything that's a part of the game comes with it. Your job is to navigate and play the best that you can. And that's what we're doing with life. You know what I'm saying? You're out here living the best life you can with some rules, with some boundaries. But there's some other people who ain't playing by them same rules. There's some other people who don't care about your boundaries. And they will push you to a point that you might think, oh, should I stop doing this? You know what I'm saying? Folk are hating on it. People don't like, that's your job is to keep going. And so I think that's the reflective nature that I do, every day with the people that I love, with myself, that no matter what's happening, in that day, one, I get an opportunity to help kids, families in our community. If I can do that every day, then I go home every day okay. And whatever else came from it, you know what I'm saying? Whether that was somebody, saying something crazy or saying, oh, I don't like that dude, or, this motherfucker everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, that's not on me. My job was to do what I was called to do. So you can get out of all the other stuff and just say, yeah, that's a part of the game. It's just a part of the life that you're creating. And I don't know anybody here's the rub to all this. I don't know anybody who wakes up every morning like, yo, I don't want to be shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know those folk.
Yeah.
Like who wakes up like, man, you know what? This average life is just perfect. And all you overachievers, right. Like why the fuck would you want to do that? Like, I don't know people like that. And what we know are people who are watching people who do go out and achieve and push boundaries and push envelopes. And those are the people who are trying to struggle with, do they like it or they not like it? And you'll probably have more folk that like it. We get caught up in the people who don't like it. Oh, so-and-so said they ain't like that shit. Like, that's probably 3 people.
Yeah, that is a weird part of life. It's so much easier to get caught up in the negative aspect to everything, or the negative things people are saying. I'm really glad this wasn't where I thought the conversation would go in the beginning, but I'm super glad we're talking about it and engaging with that. I'm glad I had even framed the question the way I did that would set us off on this path of the conversation, because as someone myself that is working on this podcast and wants to get more involved in the community and put myself out there more and engage with these things, those are things I think about all the time. Everything you shared, kind of, there's an idea. I'm not the first to use this phrase by a long shot, but you can't give what you don't have.
That's right.
There's this idea of, if I want to be somebody that's empowering to other people, or is helping share their stories, or, being a connector or networker, or just being more engaged in the community, with meeting lots of people, it's like, if I don't have some kind of a core foundation, or if that's not my main focus to make sure that I'm the healthiest person I can be, or that I know what the vision is or the path I'm trying to stay on, I think all that stuff gets overlooked because, so for you and me, this is our first time meeting in person, is right now recording this podcast. So it's a little bit of a weird place to start from, because, we're starting from a place of, I hope that we become friends, just put that in the universe. But like, we don't know each other, and I'm wanting to hype you up. I'm wanting to hype up the things you're involved in, and we're gonna tell your story and get to some of those more organizational things. But this kind of more organic part of it, just who you are as a person, the things you're passionate about, the things you believe in and care about, I think that's everything, that informs so much of it. So I'm grateful to you for sharing more about that and your perspective on that, because I think that's what's important. When I have on a guest like yourself, and we're all kind of in 2022, a lot of us are, jack of all trades, so to speak. We all have lots of titles and things. Everyone has their own website, stuff like this. So it's easy to get lost in like, oh my gosh, like which Keith Cradle am I meeting today? Am I meeting the author, the podcast host, the arts advocate, the community? You're
meeting. I tell people, you meet. One thing I've been good at is consistency. So I'm consistently me every day. Like all those titles, all the stuff. Like I said, that's just that. Like when people meet me, it's the same person. Like sometimes I get frustrated when folk just want to talk about some dumb shit. Like come on. Like I want to talk about the Knicks. You know what I'm saying? Like, can I talk about the Knicks too? No? All right. Like, I just want to go to the baseball game. Like, it ain't that hard. And I think people can make it uncomfortable by focusing on the things that they think they want to know, or the things that we've given them. And trust me, I'm a part of that construct too, that if you look at my Instagram, then yeah, I've given you slices and pieces of my life that just seem like, oh, this guy's got one of the best lives ever. You know what I'm saying? Like even now, we're rehabbing, my new house, and like everybody thinks that, oh, it's like HGTV over there, because I'm only showing you, the guy putting it in. But the 2 weeks before that, here's the problem, here's the issue. Oh, this shit's not getting done. Oh, it's going to cost how much more money? Like we choose to give people what we want to. Doesn't mean that at the end of the day that I didn't have, trial, tribulation, struggle. I just choose to deal with that differently. Like people that my friends and family who are close to me, they know I'll put the call out. I've talked to them all day long. I didn't need to ask a ton of strangers on Facebook, hey, what's your opinion on the fact that someone broke up with me? You know what I'm saying? Like I don't need to do that. I have core friends and family who I can go to that will give me the solid advice that I need. They'll deal with it the way I know they'll deal with it, and they won't go telling everybody else. And then people get mad when they told everybody else, but you told everybody else on Facebook 2 hours ago. It just blows my mind. And so I think, like I say, for me, it really is that when folk meet you, just be the genuine you. And some people are trying to act like, they're not goofy, or, they're not nerds, or all this stuff. Like, if that's who you are, then be that. I struggled with that for a while, being smart, being intelligent, because coming up, as a teenager and, in the 80s, 90s in New York, like nobody wanted smart kids. You know what I'm saying? Either you was selling drugs, you was playing ball. And as you can see, I'm not that tall. So the basketball career wasn't happening, and I didn't hustle. You know what I'm saying? So I had to work a regular job, and that meant making, a little bit of cash every 2 weeks. And I couldn't keep up with what everybody else was doing. But I had to realize early on I was going to run my own race. And when you understand that early and get those kind of concepts down, it helps build a foundation for how you move for the rest of your life. That I recognized that I wasn't in competition with no one else. Like this was the life I needed to live. And it was going to be different from somebody else and everybody else. And while there can be some similarities, while you can pull from people, which we should do, you should glean from mentors and older, people who are wise and have that wisdom, you still got to create the life that you want. And I saw that and I did that. But through it, I'm still Sheila Cradle's son. I'm Derek Cradle's little brother forever. No matter how old I get, I'm still always his little brother. And those are the things that I'm always going to be grounded in. I'm someone's son. You know what I'm saying? I'm William Cradle's son. I'm someone's son. I'm someone's brother. I'm an uncle. The two amazing young nieces. I mean, that's what this is all going to come back to. All this other shit, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no one's going to remember half that other stuff. I'm going to remember what's important, which is the family, the friends, and how did I comport myself with them? And if I did my last name and my family name wrong, then I did it wrong. And that's all this is. You know what I'm saying? I go out every morning with the intent to not disrespect my family name.
Yeah, I mean, you're 110% right. It is a bit of a weird dynamic we have in the modern era where I kind of view it as everyone kind of has their digital self and their real self, and you kind of we're all split identities because you have your online persona, what you're trying to put forth into the world, and we all do it. I do it like you get all the titles in the bio, and you get curate the perfect stories and pictures and whatever, and we all do it, but at the same time, you have like the organic, the living, breathing person attached to all that, and what keeps you grounded. And it's funny you talk about family name because I remember when I was working at a job, I worked at Starbucks one time, and one of my bosses, I remember telling me, like, just as a means of encouragement, make sure that you're leaving a good legacy, that you're doing all the little things well in your job, because you don't want somebody years from now to meet someone with your last name Easterday and be like, oh yeah, I remember I worked with an Easterday. You want to keep that family name on point. You want to. So I think I'm glad. This is the core of everything. We all have titles, we all have stuff we're involved in, but if we can't get it right with ourselves and with our core group of people and our loved ones and family, if we're not the same person on the inside as we're on the outside or behind closed doors or whatever, it's all kind of meaningless. I do have to ask though, just as a brief sidetrack. Have you seen, since you referenced The Wire, have you seen the new show We Own the City? So
yeah, I saw episode 1 because they just started. I saw the first takeaway, a lot of familiar Wire faces in there.
Yeah, I kept having to get on Google and look up the cast 10 years after.
They basically took all the guys who were I'm not going to call them criminals, but on this show at the time, they were probably the drug dealers, the corner boys. They turned them all into cops.
I was looking at, I think the actor's name is Trey Chaney, but I was like, it's Poot.
It's Poot. Yeah, so he's a cop. Odd. And even one of the other kids in season 4, he was one of the younger pups that they were bringing up with Michael and a few others. He played one of the dirty cops. And then you got all the other cops that were on the show. They're now promoted, to, I think, chief of police and, so it's just interesting to see that portion of it. But I don't know. The first episode, I kind of wasn't all the way pulled in, so I don't. I got to see what the next episode look like, and does it get better by 3? Because I understand usually first episodes are more character building, trying to figure out like who's who and who does what, and then we'll get into the meat of the story. Episode 3, 4, 5, and HBO's got a formula, so it ain't hard to figure out.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast recapping the show earlier today, and they said something that I kind of echoed, which is which I thought as well, which is just kind of nice to be back in that world with those characters. I mean, it's a lot of similar actors playing different characters, but it's that same kind of formula for showcasing the city of Baltimore, the policing, all the stuff that's going on there. So I just had to bring that up offhand because you mentioned The Wire, and I'm a big Wire fan.
Because it's been about 25, probably 20 plus years from The Wire, I think. So
it's been a really long time, and that's actually a show I watched through HBO probably within the last few years. I finished the whole series. I mean,
yeah, I usually watch it once a year. Just go back through it. It never gets old. I mean, because the story doesn't change. You know what I'm saying? The same things that were happening then are happening now, and those stories just don't change.
I don't know if it's I don't know what the word is for it, but yeah, a lot of the things in that story you can very much see in modern era. It's and past and it's there's an evergreen nature to all the plot lines in The Wire that can be really depressing if you think of it in a certain way. But But it's also it's a great story. So that's kind of our PSA for just The Wire in general. If you haven't watched The Wire,
tap in.
I know many people that haven't seen it, and it always blows my mind because it's so clearly like one of the best shows that's ever been created for a number of reasons. And well worth the time and well worth the watch. One last sidetrack you know what? There's no one last sidetrack. We're going to get sidetracked 5 more times, whatever. There's no sidetrack. We're just having a conversation. It's all good. But so New York, and I've seen this on social media a little bit. So that means you're a New York sports fan all through and through, right?
I am. And like most New Yorkers, you kind of get divided down the middle depending on your allegiances. So, when you look at how many teams New York has, New York, like California and Texas, you got a lot of options. And so typically, most New Yorkers will kind of fall on one of two sides. You're a Yankees fan or a Mets fan. Then on the Yankee side, you got the Knicks. And now on the Mets side, you got the Nets. and then you got the Rangers, and then you got the Islanders, and then you got, whatever else falls into those categories. So I'm on the Yankee, Nick, Ranger side. And while I can honestly say, like most people in any sports town, your city, your sports teams, they're going to take you on a roller coaster ride year after year. And depending on what kind of market you're in, what is your level of angst and veracity when it comes to your team. Like good friend of mine, and I love him to death, Michael Graff, and Michael's such a prolific writer, but he's a great baseball fan for a terrible team, those Baltimore Orioles. And so if you're an Orioles fan, back to the wire. Speaking of Baltimore, I'm sorry, Michael, it just came up. And so if you're an Orioles fan, you almost expect to lose, even though he wakes up every day like, hey, we're 0-0. And it's a new start, and I got an opportunity. We got a chance. The truth is, you kind of don't. But being a fan of a team that you expect to win, it sucks because you're like, yo, what are we doing? Like, oh, we spent $200 million and we didn't even make the what? And so you get into that, and the Knicks. Don't get me started on the Knicks. I don't have time enough to talk about the Knicks that have ruined numerous childhood memories.
Boy, what happened to them over between last season and this season could be a show unto itself.
They doing what the Knicks do. It is the Knick way that they get to a point, then they Charlie Brown that thing, Lucy just and it's over. So yeah, I think, and the Yankees again. I stopped having the heart attacks, man. So after they ran off all those World Series, you just think you're like most Yankee fans, you just feel like you're fucking entitled. Like, oh, we didn't win this year. What the hell? What's going on? And then, then when Boston wins, you're like, you got to be kidding me. And then when other teams win, I'm kind of okay. Like, I like when the Cubs won. I like that. Like, that was cool. I like when other small market teams win, except for the Rays. As long as the Devil Rays don't win, I don't care. But you get into this place where you're like, yo, what is your team doing? And the Yankees will do that because they've got talent, they've got money, and they have a pedigree, but they don't put it together. You know what I'm saying? Same way the Nets got swept, last night or not, because they you can have all the talent in the world, but if it's not out there, if it's not playing, if you're not gelling, it ain't gonna matter.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, that Nets sweep is a whole other thing.
I seen it coming.
I think secretly, I'm not going to lie and say that I did. I thought they would make it at least somewhat more of a series. I think part of that's because on principle, I just tend not to watch Boston sports. So I hear about it, but because I'm from Ohio, so I think maybe Ohio, New York, there's a similar aversion to all things Boston sports. But
I think that's around the world. I think people just don't like.
You're right. Boston. That's more universal.
You got to be from New England to love New England.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you been watching, speaking of HBO shows, have you been watching Winning Time at all?
I have.
Well, I'll make a comment and then I want to but just, I think it's so fascinating because I know it's highly fictionalized. This has been well documented, but just that whole Lakers-Boston rivalry back then and all the talk about, TD, or not TD Garden, it was the Garden, but it was Boston Garden back then. It's Boston Garden, but just... being, I don't know. It's just so fascinating to me. What have you thought about the show in general? Yeah,
I look at it again like everyone else, right? There's probably some fictionalization going on to make it a little bit more palatable for TV. You never really know, but I'm quite sure, right? I mean, if you've got real insiders, if you've got the real folks saying, that shit kind of happened. Like we know about home teams messing around with visitor locker rooms. I mean, that happened in high school. You know what I'm saying? Like turn the heat up on, like they do that stuff on purpose for psychological warfare. So I'm not surprised that happened. I think some of the characterization of folks, I didn't know the way they're making it. Larry Bird was a real dick. You know what I'm saying? And he could have, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the man, never met him, but he seems super cool now. In those Cash One, in those credit card commercials with the rest of them. I don't know. So I think for anything that's on television, particularly that's a series, you gotta give people a lot more to watch it. And I think sometimes you add in stuff. You know what I'm saying? You just can't have the meat. You got to have a bun, some lettuce, some tomatoes. You got to fill folk up. And I think you add in all that stuff because the story itself would be just kind of dry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of meat on that bone from the the Showtime Lakers coming up and what it meant for the NBA in a larger perspective. But yeah, if you just told the story as like a historical document instead of fictionalizing any part of it, it'd be way different. I'm kind of a similar mindset with it as I am with something like We Own the City, which is I'm just happy to be able to live in that world. I think some of the editorial choices, maybe not, it's hard to say because I don't know those characters on the show in real life,
right.
Their real life counterparts behind the scenes. So it's hard to say what exact parts have been exaggerated and all that. I know there's been a lot of controversy, but I just think it's cool to be in that era and see a fictionalized version of, the NBA at that time and coming up with Magic and Larry and all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. They had a standalone episode with Kareem and exploring his journey, his character. I thought was really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's just fun to, like I said, we're just meeting each other. So it's kind of fun to connect over similar shows and things that, we might see on Twitter, but just to have a real life conversation. Imagine that. What's that? Almost forgot what that was over the last couple of years. So I would be remiss if we didn't touch on at least a couple of the things that you do that kind of drew me to just you as a person and, maybe want to, have this conversation. I mean, there's a lot of things like we've talked about so far that I thought we'd get along and be able to have a great time and great conversation. But one of the things, so you actually, you are more of a pro at this than I am, honestly. You have recorded many more podcasts. You have your own podcast, Crafted with Cradle. Mm-hmm. Can you describe that, talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Crafted with Cradle was an idea that I had probably 6 or 7 years ago, but we never really thought about it being a podcast. The thing is that, as someone who's lived in this city, for me, I'm a cultural art advocate. I'm an art collector. I sit on boards for some of our museums, past and present. There were conversations that I was having, with gallerists, curators, artists, collectors that I just, I didn't feel like everyone else was having. I just felt really, really, blessed to be able to sit and talk and have these one-on-ones and real organic. You know what I'm saying? Like just, you'll meet me for lunch. Okay, cool. Or I'm stopping by, or you're at the gallery and, tell me about this piece. And then, as I would post stuff, on Facebook or IG or Twitter, folk would ask me like, oh, hey, like where is that? Or how long is that going on? Or, who's that artist? And I started to recognize that, that wasn't uncommon, that a lot of people just weren't as connected to our art and culture scene and I think in a real intentional way or in a real deep way, where most of us know the institutions, but visiting, having conversation, understanding the buying process, like there wasn't a lot of information into that unless you were inside those spaces. So I said, well, how can I amplify those conversations that I'm having and make it warm, make it inviting? And because it could, having been, a part of this art scene for over a decade, and having sat on boards and gone to galas, it can get real highbrow at times for no fucking reason. Like it can be real intimidating for some people, and it shouldn't be like that. And we wanted, this podcast, Crafted with Cradle, to be a bridge and to be a warm opening to having those conversations, but to get folk engaged. And so, we were able to utilize, connections that I had at first. When we started it, 4 years ago, I was like, well, who the fuck do I want to be on the show? Like, who's going to want to come on here?
I relate to that feeling.
We all do. We just wonder, like, who wants to come talk to me? And oddly enough, the first season, when we introduced it, one, we couldn't run out of guests. Two, I had to have, Jamaica play bully and tell folk we can't use, like, I got away easy at being talent. Like, I didn't have to tell folk no. So, but I had her telling everybody, listen, this is what we got, we booking and we're booked for the year and we can't have any. And it's like, I'm like, hey, and then, you keep doing it, but you recognize that folk, and you wonder, after you do it, you wonder, well, who's listening? It's one thing for folk to come on. It's another thing to figure out if there's anybody listening.
Yeah, so that's why I don't disclose my my numbers before I invite a guest on, because I don't want to deter anybody.
Listen, somebody's listening, and I think that's the great thing about doing a podcast. You don't worry about the numbers. You know what I'm saying? You literally do the show. And so caveat to all, there's always a lesson in there somewhere. Caveat to that is when I worked for the health department and we would do programs for communities. I was taught that you do the program if you got 1 or 1,000 people. Someone needs that information.
Yep.
And so you do it because that's what you're supposed to do. So back to the podcast. So we kicked it off, we did it. And oddly, people started liking it and people were, subscribing, sharing. But we really understood it was the information transfer, that we were getting people to museums and spaces and exhibitions and buying because they now had unfettered, easy, non-judgmental. It was like, this is what folk needed, and we recognized we understood that, and so we kept going, man. And during of course COVID came, and so we would always tape the show, in my house and have folk over because we wanted that warm feel too. We wanted that like if we were in my kitchen or in my living room or in wherever, we wanted that feel. We make the drinks, and you always get good content when you get people saucy. Like that is the A1 tip. If I ever leave you with anything, if you don't learn anything, if you get people sauced up, they will tell you anything.
Wow, I've been doing the opposite. I drink a lot of coffee before I come on.
But we had so much fun, and we got the information we needed. And so then COVID came, of course, like everybody else. We went, virtual. And then we also started doing some live offerings too. We recognized that how could we help our community? So we started doing a bunch of live tapings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We'd go live with, whether at the time, Jeep was the ASC president, Sonia Pfeiffer over at Elder. We were just getting folk on, Davita Galloway, Dubbin Swat, and Megan Miller, Upper Carolina. We had Tom Gabbard on, and letting the community know, like, how can we help you? You guys are the ones that are shut down. So how do we help you all? And how do people continue to support when they can't show up? And what I saw early was that our community really showed up and showed out during the pandemic, whether that was, creating new works, the Black Lives Matter mural. Artists stayed out there because that's their livelihood. And they kept making art. They kept trying to beautify our city. And my job as an advocate was to, how do we, again, amplify that? How do we let folk know how to get in touch with you? How do people buy your stuff? Because if this is your job, then you need to be selling it. And folk need to be able to get in contact with you, and how can they find you, and how do we price so you're not getting ripped off? That was the call, and we love it. We loved it. And so, we're supposed to start season 5 in February, but life transitions for me between new job, new house. So we had to we had to step back a minute because, again, it's only one me. And one thing I do understand is self-care. And while I do have that mantra of never not working and being everywhere at the same time, even I go to sleep. Even I go home. Even I know when to say no. And I had to learn how to say no, over these years, because as you said earlier, if you're not the best self, if you're not your best self, then you can't give anyone else what they need. And so, so we made a conscious decision to go ahead and just, scuffle the series, for however long it needs to, until I'm in a better place in terms of work, home, we got the camping going. I mean, there's a lot happening. And so you get to this place, man, and I watched Lord of the Rings a million times too. But, like Bilbo said, man, you feel like, butter spread over toast, just real thin. You just feel thin because you're so spread out everywhere else, and you don't have enough collectively to put 100% into those projects that you need to be at. So folk are asking, but we'll get back to it. but in the appropriate time. And then and it's going to be pick up right where we left off. And, I think the one thing people recognize that, we were genuine about what we do. People know I'm genuine about, the art culture in our community. And so, we'll be back.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, just as somebody that admires your work and what you're doing and your ability to just tell other people's stories, advocate on behalf of others, as a fellow podcast host who wants to do the same thing, so that's great news. I go, it's no secret, I've talked about it on the show before, but I go to therapy. That's like a big value for me, talking about the self-care. And it kind of blows my mind sometimes when I'm having conversations with my therapist that sometimes it can be as simple as, hey, are you actually getting enough sleep? Are you actually resting? Are you actually paying attention to your body and what it's telling you and the needs that you have? I mean, that's been a big revelation for me. So I'm with you. I'm always trying to do, the hashtag never not working. I'm trying to hold that down myself, but you're only one person. You can only do so much. So I resonate with a lot of that. And I appreciate you sharing more about the podcast and its focus. One of the things I've noticed since, because it'll be 4 years this year that I've lived in Charlotte, is so the organization I work for, the nonprofit I work for, Current Initiatives, one of the campaigns we have across the United States is called the Clean Campaign, where we work with local mural artists to paint murals on the sides of laundromats that we work with, where we host like our free laundry day events. And it's all around that idea of clean, just that word and all the different meanings that it has for laundry and otherwise. And so all that to say, over the years, I had the pleasure of even helping with one of those murals in a very small way in Akron, Ohio. That's still up and still going strong. But it gave me a really big time appreciation for art, for local artists, for mural art especially. And I've noticed that Charlotte has a really strong arts culture in general, but also every day I get on Instagram and I'm following a new mural artist in the city. I mean, there's just that part of it especially has spoken to me. And I've even gotten to be in some spaces over the last 3.5 years where I've met a few of those people. And it's always a big honor because I'm in love with the work. I'm in love with the murals, all the stuff the community is creating. If there was one thing, for someone like myself that's still somewhat of an outsider, kind of getting to learn the community, what's one thing you would share about the Charlotte arts community that you feel like maybe most people don't know or don't realize or understand?
I would share that it is, it's very unified, and they are doing amazing work, but they are underfunded, and that means that art organizations, funders, people that write grants, they've really got to dig a little bit deeper, because a lot of these artists are trying to do this full time, but that's hard to do when you got to work, 2 part-time jobs, or of course we know that property value and rent is going up in Charlotte every hour. That people are trying to make a living, and they can't do that if they're not making a living. And so that is a big thing about, artists, and what we're looking at now is the sustainability of the craft and the work that they're trying to do, and how we get them there, and is the pay scale where it should be. Some of those practices in which they got to write to some of these grants. Why are you making folk fill out 20 pages for $15? You know what I'm saying? Like the money doesn't even justify the amount of fucking paperwork you want and outcomes. And the people who sit behind the desk and read those, like, you really think that was the way to go? No, you should be simplifying those processes. A lot of these artists, a lot of the people that are, doing the work, that's not their bag to be, all versed in, outcomes, processes. And if I write this grant 10 times and I'm going to look at the statistical geometry of the line, and you're going to talk about giving me, $1,000 after all, like, get out of here. Up the money and lower the page and lower the work, to get to the money. And I think that is one of those issues that people, and I get it. I can say it because I'm not an artist. So, and I've advocated for art agencies. I've sat on their boards, so they know how I feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, cut the shit. Like, stop making it so hard. And then the other side of that is the parity. That while we know that there are a slew of artists that can do the work, stop picking the same fucking people. Like, why is it that it's the same person or same persons doing 80% of the work? Like that, how do you grow a community when you keep selecting the same people? That doesn't make sense. So you got to start saying, particularly the gatekeepers, the folk who want to pay for stuff, if you're an owner of a building and you want a mural, like ask someone else, like take a look around and at least solicit some other ideas. Not saying you got to take them, but at least go outside of your zone and say, before I do select, blah, blah, let me take a look at, or ask someone to send you some names. Stop picking the same people, because it can start to look real white, particularly when we talk about murals, the bigger murals. And folk know that, but they still perpetuate the same bullshit, but they want to say, oh, we're trying to be inclusive. How? If you only picking your friends, if you only picking the people that you think are hot. Now, I'm not saying don't pick hot artists, and I will never say pick a trash artist. But the only way people get better, the only way people get exposure is people got to give them a shot. You got to give somebody a chance. Doesn't mean you got to give them the 90-foot wall today, but if you got a 6-foot wall, let me see what you can do.
Yeah, just simply having opportunity is the quickest path to many things, many great things in life, having the chance. So talk to me about Camping with Cradle, because I know that's very recent, that you started that within the last couple of years. I've read some stories, watched some news clips on it. So I have kind of a general understanding, but if for somebody that's never heard of it before, isn't familiar with it, just, what is Camping with Cradle? What do you do? What is it all about? What's the heart and, the vision behind it?
Yeah. So Camping with Cradle is my nonprofit in which we take young boys and girls out camping, a lot of first timers, a lot of minorities. Because again, one of those things that people think is white, and it's not. I grew up camping. I was a camp counselor. And so, my love for the outdoors, continued to follow me no matter where I went. But I also noticed that, there were other folk that weren't having those same experiences. And as I got out, whether it was backpacking, hiking, camping, you didn't see a lot of black and brown faces, particularly in some of our state parks. And I will say, caveat that North Carolina's got probably some of the most beautiful state parks, in this country. But the access, the inclusion, the diversity of them, you just don't see. And so, as I hiked and backpacked, and again, you put stuff on IG or wherever else, people see it and they're like, oh, where is that? Or I would love to do that. So anything that I've ever done, it kind of usually starts from that, if I'm doing it, other people kind of say, oh, I would love to do that. And then more or less, it was probably more calls from parents, because people knew I worked with kids, particularly through the sheriff's office. And so it was like, hey, my son or daughter would love to go camp. I've never been camping, or I don't know how to do it. And can you, sure. But at first I kind of reluctant, nah, I'm not trying to take somebody's kids. If they fall off a cliff, shit's on me.
Yeah, you're liable for that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do that. But, the call just kept getting louder and louder, and it doesn't go away. And I was like, you know what, here's an opportunity. And again, whether we were going to take one kid out last summer or, 100 kids, we were going to do it, man. And it surprised me. I remember we did the first outing. We had 4 kids, and I was like, at first I was like, yo, we're actually doing it. We're doing this. Yeah, this is happening. And then just what I believe that Charlotte always is, which is a community of people who believe in great ideas. They believe in good people, but they believe in children and they believe in opportunity. Folks saw it, and before you know it, we started getting donations. I was like, well, oh hell. Now I really gotta do this thing. Folk are donating money. And money is one of those precious resources that people have an option and a choice to do with. People don't have to send you anything. And people were making choices to say, you know what, I want to give you $25. I want to give you $10. I want to give you, someone, announced we, donated $3,000 one time. We were like, yo, what the fuck?
Wow.
The mission really resonated, with our community. That they wanted to help diversify those spaces and get kids camping for the first time. And we just kept going. And so, we're in year 2. We already started, it's getting warmer now. Now for me as a seasoned camper back, I'll go any time of the year, but I won't take kids out until it's, a good 70, 70, 80 degrees. You don't want to break them early and ruin the experience, and they never want to do it again. So we're getting ready to get deep into the season. We've got trips lined and booked up. I've got parents calling. And so, it's just, for me, I'd go camping every weekend if I could, and I love the fact that when I do take other people, it feels like my first time too, because it's their first time. I've had moms and dads tell me, yeah, he's never slept outside, under the stars before. And for me, I can't even fathom that, because I've done it so many times. But then when you take people, you realize that you don't want to take those moments for granted. You know what I'm saying? That when you look up at those stars, you're like, yo, here's another opportunity to do that, but you're exposing someone else to do it. So it's just, our motto, pack your gear, not your fear, because we don't want you to be afraid. We don't want you to feel like you can't do it. Again, taking down those barriers of intimidation. We provide all the gear. Thanks to all of our donors and sponsors, man. We have a ton of gear. So no kid has to buy anything. And I love buying gear. Like, oh, I get to buy another tent? Oh shit. And I get to set it. I'm like a kid, man, when it comes to that stuff. So any kid that comes to us, they don't need anything. No money, no gear. You don't need a ride, nothing. We got you. And to give that experience, you know what I'm saying, at no cost. That's what it's all about. And whatever. And I've had kids on both sides of the spectrum. I have kids who say, "Oh man, I loved it. Like, oh, I want to do this again." I've had kids say, "Oh, this I hated it." It doesn't matter to me. The fact is, you've had the experience now, and you're a part of the longer conversation. That if someone were to ever ask you, have you ever gone camping? You no longer can say no. You at least have an informed opinion now about camping. Like, oh yeah, I slept outside and it sucked. Cool. Versus, I've never done that. I hate when I hear children, even adults, tell me they've never done something. Like, that just does something to me, because we should all have experiences in this life at least once outside of smoking crack. Like, you should have an experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, you should be like, yo, I want to at least try that once, unless it's heroin or crack.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Again, tying it back to the wire.
You don't need to experience that. We know what that looks like. But if you've never, back to the, because for me, it all runs the same, whether it's camping, it's the cultural arts, whether it's camping, the opera, you know what I'm saying? Going to a gallery, going overseas. If you've never done something, how do we fix that?
Yeah, I like that attitude just in general about, helping people have experiences they may not otherwise have or would have had otherwise, or even have access or opportunity to have those experiences. I resonate. It's different for me, obviously. I think what you're doing with Camping with Cradle is incredible for a number of reasons. But for me, I grew up in a situation with like a single parent household where there are many things in life I can say kind of growing up, just because of our circumstances and the stuff we went through as I grew up, that I didn't have the opportunity to have access to those things, or I didn't get to experience them or whatever. And being outdoors, being outside of my home, going on camping trips, stuff like that, that was one of those things. It wasn't until I was much older that I started to get outside more, go do more of those things with friends in college. I had very adventurous friends that would go on road trips and let me tag along. And I just remember it kind of opened up a whole new world. So on that level, I resonate and can appreciate, where you're coming from, of the just the incredible power that exists, the cool things that happen when you're able to just provide an opportunity like that. I studied youth ministry in college for a time. That was one of my majors, was in the youth ministry. And I remember one of my professors saying that in many ways, if you're in a youth group, if you're leading, if you're working with kids, you become kind of a gateway and a vehicle for them to experience things that, maybe fulfill their dreams or experience things they would have never experienced otherwise, or have opportunities or meet people or whatever, and just like I said, coming from where I came from in my own family's personal situation, there were a lot of outside, within my own family especially, but there were also, youth leaders and people kind of like yourself that were just like, hey, we're going to open up a whole new world to you. And that helped. A lot of that stuff helped shape me into who I am, not just the influence of, my mom and all that she did to help me turn into who I am, but, just all these people that were in my life surrounding it that kind of came in as like an outside influence played a really big role. So I definitely appreciate it from that standpoint. As we're kind of wrapping up a little bit here, we've talked offline before the podcast we started recording, that you've lived in Charlotte for 30 years on the dot, or about 30 years. So it's kind of a two-part question, just as somebody that, so I've been here such a short amount of time, but somebody like yourself that has seen the city and the community evolve and take shape in so many ways, through through that lens, through that experience of 30 years, what have you seen as these are some of the strengths of Charlotte, and then, just some of the ways that it can grow or improve moving forward?
Yeah, and that, that question could get, probably long-winded, the answer anyway, because Charlotte is complex, like any city USA right now. It's going through, its challenges. And of course, we all know that, COVID ripped the Band-Aid off of a lot of things in all these cities. And so, I think the strength of Charlotte will always be community. That, people love Charlotte. They love coming here. They love making a difference. Hence the reason why Charlotte's got probably one of the largest number of nonprofits, per capita in its city, because people want to find a way to make a difference. They really say to themselves, like, how can I help out, those less fortunate, vulnerable, struggling. And I think that just always reminds me of the work that we all need and should be doing. The other thing about it is, it just also shows where we're missing out, because if we need all these added enhancements to help people, it just means that we haven't done it in the past. And so Charlotte's got a lot of deep history. And I would tell anybody, man, as they continue to come here, particularly folk who are coming here, such as yourself, in the last 4 or 5 years, people who will move here next year, do your history, and make it a point to meet people who have lived here, who have grown up here, who have been a part of the fabric, and can tell you about Charlotte's rich history. And in that, you'll learn a lot more, particularly about, I think, as we think about gentrification, development. People are coming here now, man, thinking like, oh, wow, I live in this new neighborhood. And like, bro, that neighborhood was somebody else's neighborhood long before you got here. And they didn't have the same opportunity to build, the capital, the wealth that you're getting to do now. And so I think sometimes those conversations are very jaded. They're very slanted, because they're coming from the perspective of people who have just picked up and got here and say, oh, yeah, I know about Freemore. It's fucking Freedom Drive, man. Like, cut the shit. I'm telling you, as long as I've lived here, man, you didn't go down Freedom at night. You know what I'm saying? In those 90s and in those 2000s. And now folk come here and they're like, oh, yo, you can hang out and chill. Yeah, I get it. And we all want safe, bright, workable, healthy communities. We all want that. But at what expense? And are we moving people out and moving them away and not providing the same levels of opportunity on that playing field that levels it? And so, that I always caution folk to that, man. Don't come here and get giddy. Come here and want to learn and say, okay, what do I need to learn? Who do I need to talk to? What can I pick up from that conversation? And then how do I help that out? Because at the end of the day, this is a capitalistic country, and Charlotte being probably the banking capital of the U.S., if not third, second, first, doesn't matter. There's money in Charlotte. There's money being made in Charlotte. But who are the beneficiaries of that? And if we're continue to oppress and push people out and push people away, what kind of city are we making? And who are we making the city for? I love to laugh and tell people, listen, I'm 47. So which means if they say like, the 2040 project or 2050 plan or 27, but guess what? That's not for me. And what I'm saying? In 20 years, I'm going to be tapping out of all this other extra bullshit. That's going to be for folks such as yourself, teenagers who are going to have to live here. And what kind of city are we creating for them? That is it inhabitable? Again, is there parity there? Are these communities diverse? Can they afford it? I'm telling you, I had these same conversations every day, and I just wonder how families of four, how are you doing it? Like, groceries are up, gas is up, rent, mortgage, all this stuff is up, and you still got to pay for childcare. You got to pay for just the basic, everyday things, and don't get caught up in a hospital bill, or the car's got to go into the shop. all these things that could take your shit off tilt. Because when you kind of going, you're like, okay, I'm good. Like I'm on my little plane here and I'm fine. But if something were to upset that, can you bounce back? Can you find your way back? And for a lot of people in Charlotte, we're watching, even in the United States, we're watching folk fall off that access, and it's hard for them to get that cart back, to even. So we got to be real cognizant about that, particularly here in Charlotte, in our communities, that we're not upsetting people's carts, man. They can't get this thing back to even. And then even when they get to even, how do we get them elevated? Because it's not enough to maintain. You shouldn't want to live in this life just maintaining. Like I'm just doing okay. No disrespect to any of that, but we shouldn't have folk doing just okay. You know what I'm saying? There's so much. We talk about those gaps in wealth. Man, you got, like that quarantine showed us all that, everybody, while the president or whomever, Fauci didn't get on the news and say, oh yeah, we're all in this together. It's bullshit. If you're living in an 8-bedroom mansion with 2 people, your quarantine living was way different than a family who's in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 or 4 kids trying to, put together a meal plan. Because now these kids ain't going to school, and now we're not in this together. And people will sell you that as we're not all in this together. But we gotta find a way to get in this together. Because if one is suffering, then trust me, we're all suffering, and we're not making this a better place in Charlotte for people to live, to recreate, to work, to want to come here, to want to put down roots. And I'll say this, and because I could talk about a lot of shit all day, but. So even when I moved into my newer neighborhood, like this would be my second home. And my first home I owned for 14 years. And I always recognized the difference between the renters and the owners. But I never made a distinction in how I treated them. What I did was with the renters, I let them know, hey, listen, we pick up the trash right here, man. If you're going to be here, whether that's for a year or it's going to be for 5 years, 5 months, This is the code. Every man got to have a code. This is the code that we live by over here.
To reference Omar.
There you go. So if you see trash, pick it up. You live here now. Doesn't matter how long you're gonna live here. You live here now. And the same way when I moved into my new neighborhood, neighbors, everybody does the same. They taking a look. They see, somebody bought the house. You know what I'm saying? Blah blah blah. And as they all approached me, we had those conversations like, listen, they were glad that, someone like Open Door or Redfin didn't buy the house, that it was sold to a real person. And then they're getting to know the real person, that I love where I'm going to love where I live. I'm going to take care of my house. I'm going to take care of my lawn. And I'm going to take care of you guys too by looking out. Hey, listen, you got a package on the front door. Are you guys home? That's how you build community. And you treat people, how you want to be treated. And so we've got to stay in that pocket that we got to start looking out for each other. Because if it ever goes left, then if you don't have anybody, it's going to be tough for you to make it out, to make it back. And I'll end with this where, a big part of my background, I worked for the sheriff's office for 14 years. So as first as a manager, and then I was the director of youth and juvenile services for Mecklenburg County. When you see kids come into detention and get arrested like every day, I literally saw that every day for 14 years. There wasn't a day. Crime don't take days off. So it wasn't a day that someone, adult, youth, male, female, white, black, someone was getting arrested every day. And when you watch this, and particularly for our kids, and you think about what is it that we are not providing that is making this young person say, I'd rather do this because I got nothing else, then we are failing. Because if it can't be enough about, another ribbon cutting, for another apartment complex, or hey, I'm running for something and I need your vote, but I'm only calling you because I'm running right now. But then once I got that, my agenda for you is over. when you can see the suffering of people and you recognize it and you have no compunction or you don't even try to help, that's when it's all fucked up. And that's when we're not doing what we should be doing as human beings. And so I think to bring it all back to your original question, when people ask me how I'm a human being, man. I'm me, and I care about folk, and I care about this community, and I see you in that same way. That how are we being the best humans we can be? And I'm not negating color lines, race. I get all. I'm a black man. Listen, I live it every day. I don't go a day not recognizing that I'm black. I don't get to change my color when I wake up in the morning. I recognize I'm a black man in America every day. But that doesn't diminish my human side. I just learn how to put some layers on, and we go through and we get it and we get the work done. So,
I got to tell you, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that. That's a lot of really important wisdom, and I hope people lock into it. I hope they play it back. I hope they really listen in, not just to what you said, but also, I don't know. There's so much I'm almost at a loss for words because there's so much to pull from that I think is vital to, the original question of, what are the strong suits? Where can Charlotte grow? There's so much wisdom there for this city, this community in particular. But I think a lot of what you said, can apply to lots of places, lots of cities, a lot of the similar, just the ideas and the ways of seeing things and the ways of approaching it. I'm a person that is constantly learning and evolving and growing as we all are, or hopefully we all are. But one of the things I'm grateful for that I had instilled in me really early on is just the idea of community listening, that practice. I think there's an easy tendency to want to go in and fix and save and do this and do that and whatever, and think it and make all these assumptions and make judgments, whatever. But just sitting with people, listening, so much of the work is just in the engagement and the listening and the humbling of yourself, kind of tying it full circle a little bit to what we were talking about at the beginning, so that you can really empathize with what people are telling you, with the needs they're expressing. There's a friend of mine who runs a nonprofit out in St. Louis where I remember sitting down with him and talking through all the programs they have for education and jobs and all these different arms of the nonprofit, and just being like, how did you start this? How did this come up? How did this happen? And it was the same story every time of, as we engage with the community, as we listened to people, as we did some of the hard and the humbling work, it just was so obvious that here's a connection. Here's a way we can help meet this need. Here's a way we can empower this group of people or help, So I don't want to, I'm like you in that I could keep talking about this stuff all day. So I don't want to keep talking because, again, I wanted to just really sink in everything that you shared, because there's so much great wisdom. And I'm grateful to you for sharing all that, because it's one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on. Is I've watched interviews, I've read stuff, I've seen some of just your presence online, and you are very consistent in the things that you advocate for and in the ways that you talk about community and helping people and growing things. So I'm just very appreciative to you, and I'm very appreciative to you for sharing that stuff. I guess my last question would just be, how can people get connected with you, get connected with the stuff you're involved in, the podcast, the camping, any of it? If people want to get involved or learn more about you, where do they follow? How do they support?
Yeah, this is the easy part. So you can just hit the website, keithcradle.com. Everything is on there. All the links, everything that you need is on that website. If you're on Instagram, it's at, Keith Cradle PhD or at Camping With Cradle. But again, the website will get you where you need to go. So keithcradle.com or campingwithcradle.org.
Keith, thank you again, man, for coming on. I really, truly, I have this tagline of the podcast of, guests, insights, and topics that inspire and help people aspire to engage the world in a creative and hopeful manner. And I think our conversation and just who you are and what you're about so perfectly encapsulates that. And I truly hope people, again, listen back to this, just take all the wisdom, everything you shared. I hope they engage with you, get involved, check out the website, follow you on social. And I believe this conversation will help inspire many people to just see the world differently and engage it in a more creative and hopeful manner. So just thank you again.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. I'm always bad at ending podcasts, so this is where the music's going to come in, and we're going to wrap it up.